All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 112. And today, I become slightly fixated on something. So, last year, I did this kind of little mini series thing as part of my daily vlogs where I made all these videos that was basically what is a insert character class. And basically the entire purpose of that series was to kind of break down from a game design standpoint, what is it that makes these character classes these character classes. It was kind of inspired by Fabula Ultima, which I just did an in-depth review on, in the back, or in the GM section of the book. They have this entire section that is devoted to kind of explaining to the GM what the kind of class fantasies are of each one of the classes to make it kind of easier for the GM to create stories and things like that that are going to lean in to the things that makes each class cool. And so, especially with the Essential Essence 20 that I just put out, and the in-depth reviews that I've been doing, my head's been kind of getting back into class design. And so I went back and looked, and I realized that I actually haven't covered what used to be my favorite class ever. And that class is the Paladin. Now, when I was younger, Paladin was by far my favorite class, and it almost certainly had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, and Paladins were holy warriors. That had nothing to do with it at all. I also really enjoyed some of my earliest memories are watching my father play Final Fantasy IV, and the kind of change from Cecil as the Dark Knight to the Paladin was a really cool thing. So, I want to talk about what is a Paladin, what makes them different from just a cleric with a sword or a fighter with some spells. So, before we can kind of jump into like the mechanics that make paladins paladins, sorry, we first have to kind of talk about, well, where does the paladin come from? The word paladin in the term actually refers to a group of knights who are known as the Paladins of Charlemagne. They basically were 12 legendary knights that they were members of Charlemagne, who Charlemagne is. He was basically a really important person in early medieval England. He's king of the Franks, king of the Lombards, and then eventually became the emperor of what is referred to as the Carolingian Empire. But he was a really influential. He was a really influential person throughout kind of Middle Ages, England and Europe. And so the Paladins, always also known as the 12 Peers, were these kind of larger than life characters that were exemplified by their dedication their devotion to their faith and their dedication to kind of honor and being just really good people. And I don't think we actually know if they were actually based on real people. Like for in case you were unaware, like King Arthur, the stories of King Arthur are fiction, but there was a character, there was a person in history who is thought to have inspired these stories of King Arthur. So there's this little hint of truth in the just crazy amount of really interesting, fascinating fiction. And so my understanding, we actually don't know if they were based on any real people, but they started showing up in these things called chansons de gust, which is basically French for songs of, I don't know what guest means in English, but effectively they were songs and poems and stuff like that sung by troubadours and bards to entertain people. And this was a really common thing to happen at that time. That was the entertainment of it at the time. And as time went on, a lot of the stories about them kind of started to get muddled with other kind of famous knights, like the Knights of the Round Table are often kind of confused with the Paladins and things like that. And the word Paladins started being used a little more often. But when we start thinking about the actual character class of the Paladin, it was somewhat inspired by the Paladins of Charlemagne, and a few other things like the Knights of the Round Table in Arthurian legend. All of those had kind of a similar thing, where they're these people that are devoted to, for the Paladins and the Knights of the Round Table, they were devoted to God. They were Christian knights, and so the idea of a holy warrior devoted to a deity kind of took a little inspiration from that. But one of the biggest influences on it is actually a character from a book by Paul Anderson called Three Hearts and Three Lions. The character's name was Holger Karlsson. And the book itself is an isekai. Long before isekai was a word that people used. Book came out in 1961, and effectively what he was about was this character, Holger Karlsson, was in the Danish resistance against the Nazis during World War II, and as he's trying to get this defector out, or not defector, but somewhat important out of Sweden, which eventually in the book it's revealed to be Niels Bohr, who is one of the people that worked on the Manhattan Project. Anyway, as he's trying to help get this person out of occupied territory, he's shot, and then he wakes up in a completely different place. It basically seems to be kind of based on like old European, but there's mixtures of like fantasy and folklore mixed in there. There's elves and dwarves. And when he gets there, he noticed there's a horse there, and then there's also like a suit of armor and weapons just kind of chilling there. And as he looks them over and he tries them on, they fit perfectly. And on his shield it has three lions and three hearts on his shield. And so what ends up happening is he gets involved with this battle, because in this world there are two kind of main forces that are fighting each other, the forces of order and the forces of chaos, or the forces of law and the forces of chaos. Law, order, same basic thing. And that's actually one of the things that inspired the alignment system in D&D. You know, we have the lawful and chaotic axis. It was inspired from this. And so he eventually, fights on the side of law. He falls in love with a woman. The story is wonderful and amazing. But he, because of the fact that he's basically playing the part of a paladin, he holds to that. He has these very strong ideals that he holds to. And that really inspired the original Paladin class in D&D. Now, when we look at like old school, like first edition or basic versions of the Paladin, they were much closer associated with horses and mounted combats. They still did have some of those divine aspects, but the divine parts of the Paladin became much more defined the later we go on. So that's where the Paladin came from, was these paladins of Charlemagne and the Knights of the Round Table and this one character from this novel, and all of those kind of inspired this idea of, well, we already have a fighter style character, a character that uses weapons, and they did have other kind of mixed ability characters. Like you had the elf that could be both a fighter and a magic user, kind of hybrid thing. And obviously clerics could fight, but they were mostly casters. And so the paladin kind of filled this role that didn't quite exist. And again, the thing with paladins up until 4th edition was they had an extremely strict code of morals that they had to follow, and if they ever deviated from them, they could actually lose all of their paladin abilities, which makes for a very interesting character. It also gave license to play what I refer to as a lawful stupid character, which is basically someone who is going around like, yes, I shall be the hero of this story. I shall always fight for good. Is that good? Then obviously I shall do it. Well, yeah, but the world is a little bit more gray. No, good shall always prevail. That is an undead. I shall smite it. Yeah, but the undead runs the inn. Like, if you smite him, we won't have a place to... They are undead and therefore evil. Smite. Yeah, and you just pissed off the entire town because that was one of their favorite people and now we're being arrested. But I did good. Yeah, I may have a history of lawful stupid. So anyway, so that's where it comes from. Let's talk about, like, mechanics and game design. What actually makes a paladin a paladin? Well, first things first. Sorry, I got something in my eyes and it is killing me. So I just need to wipe them down real quick. Ugh. Much better. Okay, so from a game mechanics standpoint, well, first and foremost, and this has actually come up all the way into 5th edition, is the idea that a paladin is a weapon-based class, to the point where there was an interview, I don't know, a few years ago at this point, where they were talking about the paladin in 5th edition and the idea of, well, can a paladin smite on an unarmed strike? And I think it was Crawford that said, the intention for the class is the paladin is a weapon-based class. And their smiting ability is designed to be used to empower a weapon to make it do more damage. So, rules as intended, paladins shouldn't be able to smite off of a punch. However, if that's the way you want to run your paladins, then run your paladins that way. And I always like the idea of, I refer to it as a punchy paladin. But it means that from, again, a game design perspective, if we're going to be making kind of a traditional paladin style class. And I guess we should start by kind of defining what the paladin is. So paladin in and of itself is at its most basic a holy a character devoted to a deity that uses weapons to enact their will. Like the basics of the paladin. They serve a deity. That deity gives them access to limited spells, and those spells give them access to the ability to increase the damage of their attacks or do things in the name of that deity. Like, that's our basic definition of a paladin. So going back to the kind of class design aspect, if we're going to be building a paladin, the first thing we need to do is it needs to be a character that uses weapons. And the various kind of flavors of paladins throughout different TTRPGs and different video games and stuff like that, the one thing that tends to be really, really common over and over and over again is paladins using a sword and shield. Like, that, by far, the most common flavor version of a paladin is sword and board, white armor, cool magic stuff. As we get further away from original D&D and we start having paladins no longer be the, like, pure defensive characters that they were in earlier editions, we start seeing paladins take up things like warhammers. Like, if you look at like paladins from World of Warcraft, Arthas was a paladin. He used this massive great hammer maul thing to attack, and we've seen other examples of paladins that use more blunt weapons. So that can kind of deviate, but they still kind of come back to that basic idea of a weapon-based character with some holy abilities. So after we kind of define the weapon aspect of it, we need a way to differentiate it from a fighter, because fighters do this is the same thing, and so that's where the magic aspect comes from. And in earlier versions of fighters, paladins, one of the easiest ways to differentiate them from fighters in general was not so much the magic aspect, but because they were paladin was actually a subclass of a fighter at that point. It was the extremely strict code of honor that they had to follow. So playing a paladin felt different because you had that strict code of honor that you had to go to. As we get further on, they start adding in the divine spells and things like that. Start off, if you already have a fighter, you have all the stuff that you need to be able to design a paladin. Then you need some sort of deities, since we've already talked about clerics last year. Creating a pantheon and deciding how that pantheon interacts with the world is something that you've probably already done. So you've got a pantheon. Now the paladin needs to devote themselves to an aspect of that pantheon or a member of that pantheon. Or if you have a monotheistic religion, maybe they just devote themselves to the single deity that exists. So those in and of themselves are pretty simple. However, then we need to start looking at, well, what makes a paladin different from just a cleric with a sword? Because depending on the version of cleric, especially as you get further and further in to the later editions of D&D, and you start seeing like other kind of flavors of clerics show up in different TTRPGs and video games and stuff like that, clerics start becoming a little bit more aggressive. They can start using real weapons like swords and shields and maces and stuff like that. So it's no longer just, oh, well, this is someone that has some spellcasting abilities that can also use their weapon. And that's where things like smiting comes in. Smiting in and of itself, if you're unaware, Smiting, as we're talking the Paladin class, is basically the ability to add some extra holy damage of some sort to an attack that you make. In 5th edition, or in 5.0, it's actually really, really simple. Anytime you hit, you could just burn a spell slot to add extra damage onto that hit. Simple, easy, and very easy to understand. Use a limited resource like spell slots and use it to bump up your damage. Simple, easy. If we kind of take that apart and look at it more from the idea of, well, what does that mean from a mechanic standpoint? It's basically allowing this particular character to use magic to make their weapon stronger, which will massively differentiate them from the fighter, because the fighter doesn't get to increase their weapon damage by putting some sort of magic into it. They might use a magic sword, but it's all based on how many attacks they can make and how many cool things they can do as part of those attacks. A cleric, on the other hand, has access to the ability to call down, holy light from the sky. They're a full caster, and so they can do stuff like that, but they don't really channel their magic through their weapons. They channel it through their holy symbol, or they channel it through their faith, or things like that. And that's one of the things that makes a paladin so unique, is the idea that they're going to channel their holy abilities specifically through their weapons and armor, depending on which kind of flavor you're looking at. When we get up to like the 4th edition version of the Paladin, they're a defender. They have the defender role. So they're defensive characters, and they're able to kind of buff their allies and get enemies to kind of focus on them. When we look at things like Final Fantasy, the Paladin class in general, as it shows up, tends to be a little bit more defensive in nature. The cover command is really, really common, starting with Final Fantasy, I think 4 is where you first start getting the cover. Though I think they might have had a knight class in 3 that allowed you to do the same thing. But so we're translating that back to a TTRPG. We really want to focus on creating kind of a new class of spell whose purpose is not to directly interact with the world like a cleric or wizard would do, but actually to modify the properties of weapons and armor. And again, the most basic version of that is the smite ability. I burn a spell slot, I do extra damage, and that works perfectly fine. But when we look at like the 5th edition version of the 5.0 version of the Paladin, they had all these other smite spells where what you would do is you would burn a bonus action to imbue power into your blade, and then when the next time you hit somebody with it, it would do something impressive. And in base 5th edition, smite spells were limited almost exclusively to paladins. I think there was a couple subclasses that eventually came out that gave smite spells to a few other subclasses, but for the most part, it was a uniquely paladin thing. Paladins could use their holy power to modify their weapons. And the thing with kind of 5th edition smite spells, and we saw this in 4th edition a fair amount as well, was if it wasn't like your kind of basic smite was just, here's extra damage. Every variation on top of that was not just, here's extra damage that's fire, or here's extra damage that's lightning. That really wasn't a thing. Like elements and stuff like that is not really something that paladins deal with. Generally what would happen is if you were using a different smite spell or a different power or whatever, it would allow you to do something else as part of that. Like maybe there's a smite spell that attacks and then pushes them, or one that attacks and then gives them a damage over time effect. Something that allows the paladin to start modifying what they can do with those attacks. Now, at the same time, paladins also got access to a few of the more defensive cleric spells. things like Armor of Faith, where they could raise their own armor class to make them harder to hit, or give it to someone else to make them harder to hit. In 4th edition, they would get abilities where they could like strike with their shield, or mark enemies so that they could come. They would be encouraged to attack the Paladin. I don't think Dungeons and Dragons in general, though, has really looked into that aspect of a Paladin style character anywhere near as much as I think they could. So again, from a game design perspective, having one kind of branch of spells that Paladins get access to that allows them to empower their weapons in certain ways makes perfect sense, fits with the Paladin. And like I said, from a game design perspective, the things you want to focus on is, yeah, extra damage is nice, but you also want to give some sort of utility to it. Because if you focus exclusively on extra damage, when you're not really making a Paladin anymore, you're kind of shifting it more towards the idea of an Avenger style class, which does exist. And modern 5th edition, the Avenger is one of the subclasses of Paladin. It's called the Oath of Vengeance. So it is a style of Paladin where they focus almost exclusively on that extra damage and the smiting spells. But at the same time, you could also create a bunch of spells that are more armor defensive in nature. And right now, 5th edition really just has, well, we will increase your AC. And that's really all they have for defensive things. But if you're designing a Paladin style class like that and you want them to be more defensive, doing things like being able to, like smite, you basically buff your sword. Being able to basically buff your shield with various things, like if an attack hits you, you can use your shield, or the next time someone makes an attack roll against you, something like that. You can basically bless your shield to where it will do certain things if somebody hits you, whether that's knocking them back, exploding if you want to go the damage route. The things like that can make more interesting Paladin style characters. And at the same time, the ability to kind of buff their armor to do things. One of the things that can't remember which TTRPG it was that I saw this in. It might have been one of the flavors of D&D, but they would have things where allies next to you will get this bonus. So we see it in 5th edition with a bunch of the feats every so often, like I think it's the Shield Master feat, where if an ally is within 5 feet of you and gets attacked, you can use your shield to basically give disadvantage to the attack roll. Things like that, if you were to kind of buff the armor of the Paladin, to have it do certain things. And I guess they kind of do that. They don't really call it buffing the armor, but one of the things that Paladins became kind of known for throughout D&D in general is they would have these auras that just always happened. They would do everything from improving your ability to resist spells, being unable to be afraid while you're in the aura, other stuff like that. So if we translate the auras directly into like buffing your armor, then we have something that's a little bit more dynamic. Again, the auras really, really cool. They do lots of cool stuff in D&D, but they're very, very passive. And one thing that Paladins really aren't is passive. So by either letting them cast spells on their armor to create those auras, or even just giving them choices of, when I do this, I can change my aura, or I can make something happen in my aura, I think makes for a significantly more interesting, unique play style, which would require the Paladin players to actually be kind of aware of what's happening with the other players to make sure they have the right aura on and are in the right place so that their allies are getting the best benefit from that. So yeah, so the idea of a wholly based character that is effectively equipment based, weapon, armor, stuff like that, like that's how they enact their deity's will, is by infusing their weapons and armor with abilities given to them by their master. And then the final aspect of the paladin in general is the ability to heal. Like they've had lay on hands forever. So just taking that little aspect from the cleric and giving paladins a version of it. Lay on hands is a really, really simple way that they do it. As much as lay on hands is really kind of iconic, I've never been super, super happy with lay on hands, just because in general it takes away from the other aspects of the paladin. Like if I have to use lay on hands, then I don't get to use my weapons. So I'm actually okay with the idea of a paladin just having access to healing spells or things like that, or maybe a different way to heal, but also having the ability to use their weapons in that. And I think it's Neverwinter. There's certain abilities that basically allow a paladin to heal people as they attack. And I think that fits in a little bit better with the idea of this kind of weapon equipment based holy warrior. If we want to give them the ability to heal, we're doing things like, and I think in 4th edition they had stuff like this too. I can't remember if it was specifically the paladin that had it. But things like, if I cast this spell, then, or if I empower my weapon with this smite ability, when I hit with it, I can choose an ally to regain some hit points from the attack, or things like that. I think fits the idea of a paladin significantly better than, oh, well, they're also kind of a mini cleric and they can heal every so often. Don't get me wrong. Lay on hands, really, really cool, interesting thing. It just doesn't feel quite like the paladin that we see in other aspects of it. It kind of, anytime a paladin uses lay on hands, specifically in combat, it feels like it's kind of breaking the stride of the paladin. So again, I'd much rather see, again, a weapon-based one. I hit an enemy, ally gets to get some hit points, or an armor-based one. An enemy hits me, or I deflect something with my shield, and then that somehow is given the ability to heal an ally. Both of those would make for a very dynamic paladin, and it would also kind of mix up how the paladin works if effectively. If the paladin is going more the kind of defensive route, then they're going to want to do everything they can to encourage enemies to attack them, because they have all these different abilities that when they get attacked, they get to proc different things. Whereas if they're going more the kind of offensive weapon-based aspect of it, well, then they probably want to kind of single out enemies so they can kind of just go to town on them, then move on to the next one. Again, very Avenger-esque. So yeah, and then mixing and matching that, those aspects where the player gets to kind of choose and pick which ones they like but better, gives you a very interesting character where you can focus on either end of the spectrum or do something in the middle and be able to kind of change up your playstyle a lot. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, do you like paladins? Because I like paladins. Do you like paladins? I like paladins. And what do you think about this kind of version of a paladin that we've created here, where everything is basically based on either empowering a weapon or empowering a piece of their armor to do something unique? What do you think of that idea? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.